Good day, spiritual artists. This is CJ Miller, your host of the Spiritual Artist Podcast. I am kind of jazzed today because someone, and I'm going to call her out, Heidi, responded to an earlier video with some intuitive questioning. And I love that. I love when you respond to what I'm talking about, and then I can share what I know about creative intelligence. So please feel free to leave comments in the future. We're at chapter 21, so we're getting down to the last four chapters here, and this is a great time for you to get some good guidance about creative intelligence. And today's chapter is really addressing part of what Heidi needs to face, and we all should face in the creative process. So, quote, surrender happens spontaneously with the knowledge that you are not in control of anything, not even your thoughts or feelings. When you realize that you are not in control of your life, but life is governed by some supreme law, then surrender happens. End quote. And this is by Garuda Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. I hope I pronounced that right. It's a very tough name, but it's a beautiful quote. So, chapter 21, surrender. Today, I don't feel like a spiritual artist. I feel overwhelmed, tired, and a bit angry. I have several work projects that need to be completed. I want to finish this book and several paintings, and I'm trying to force my way into the proper consciousness for co-creation. It seems as though I'm getting further away from my goal. I know many different ways to access the state of a spiritual artist: silence, meditation, music, and monitoring my thoughts. But I'm only able to focus on the pressure of my deadlines. It feels as though the more I persist, the more it resists. Once more, I'm reminded that you can't force your way into consciousness. When you force the process, it appears as though you're going in circles. Often, to-do lists are created, projects are listed, then you start pushing through them. You fumble awkwardly, feel resistance, and stumble to a halt. You may feel angry and sad at the same time. How do you break this cycle? Surrender. Surrender is a powerful spiritual practice. Surrender is the process of releasing all expectations for an outcome. It means relinquishing your vision of completing the work by a specific time and having it look a certain way. When we examine the word surrender itself, we recognize that render means to release or hand over to another. Surrender. Render means to release or hand over to another. My ego self, or human self, believes it knows what is best and has expectations of how that outcome will manifest in my life. As a spiritual artist, I must render my effort to a greater power and recognize that creative intelligence will deliver the best possible creative result. We define spirit as love, abundance, and creativity. So what else could it create but more of the same? As an artist, your resistance may be as simple as, I must finish this book today, or I should be done with this painting by now. These thoughts are the opposite of surrender. They're trying to control the creative process. But the creative process is fluid. Nature has demonstrated that dams cannot control the flow of a river. The river's force will eventually shift beyond its boundaries. Spirit speaks to us in the fluidity of the moment. Its most potent and immediate power is in the present moment. When we honor our need to surrender, we release our false sense of control and hand it back to creative intelligence. We place ourselves in the center of that river's flow. When you try to predict the ending of your trip on that river, you are not surrendering. When you try to force a painting to its completion, that is not practicing surrender. You must always stay present in the intuitive impulse of the moment. Surrender cannot be dishonest. You can't fake surrender, for spirit knows us thoroughly. You must authentically accept resignation before any real shift can occur. If you pretend to surrender only to complete the project, your efforts will be futile. As I try to complete this chapter, one of my Boston Terriers, bandit has jumped up on my lap and placed himself between me and my computer. How do I respond to this? Do I yell and push him to the ground so I can proceed with my typing? Or do I stop my efforts, practice my awareness of him, and scratch his shoulder blades? Creative intelligence is always speaking to us, not just through our creativity, but through everything that surrounds us. What is Spirit telling me? Perhaps to slow down my feverish typing and ponder my thoughts a bit longer before recording them. Perhaps to fully understand the concept of presence before continuing. We practice surrender when we listen to what creative intelligence is guiding to us. This is not relinquishing our free will, for we are choosing to surrender. We don't have to decide the exact manner in which creation will unfold. I'm going to repeat that because it's so key when you are working with creative intelligence. We don't have to decide the exact manner in which creation will unfold. We can continue to push our efforts on the physical plane and we will get some results. But the spiritual artist co-creates with a greater power. We are spirit ourselves. Spirit is within us as us. When we practice surrender, we release the process back into the dance and work on a spiritual level. We are acknowledging creative intelligence and listening to its voice. We can then react with authenticity in the present moment. American spiritual author and teacher Joel S. Goldsmith clarifies the concept of surrender in Practicing the Presence. Quote, "There is only one selfhood, and that one is God. We entertain a false sense of that self. We call that false sense Bill, Mary, or Henry, and then we are concerned about Bill, Mary, or Henry. Always there is some problem to plague one. It is the rent, it is the heart, it is the mind, or it is the friend. This will be true as long as there is concern for ourselves. Once we give up concern for this human sense of self and realize that we exist as God, fulfilling itself in an individual way, and that the responsibility is on that God's shoulder, we relinquish this false sense of responsibility. Then God fulfills its destiny as individual being." End quote. I love that quote. Goldstein clarifies the need to render our self-concern. When he speaks of surrender, he refers to a deeper definition than our traditional understanding. Many people define surrender as admitting defeat, something we do as we fling a white flag to the ground and count our losses. But we are not surrendering to a greater power that is forcing us to our knees. We are surrendering to the power within ourselves, creating space within for our intelligence of being to express. I'll say that again. We are surrendering to the power that is within ourselves, creating space within for an intelligence of being to express. It's creative intelligence expressing as love, acceptance, and knowing. By practicing surrender, we acknowledge our connection to something greater within and without, and open ourselves to spiritual guidance. Ernest Holmes, New Thought writer and teacher, reaffirms this concept in his book, The Science of Mind. We are not rendering our authority to another. We are surrendering to ourselves, our intelligence of being. Quote, "There is a pattern of God behind our personality, seeking unique expression through it, and to this we should surrender everything we are. For this surrender will not lead us away from reality. It is not an escape, but a revelation and instrumentation of something greater than we appear to be." End quote. When we surrender, we acknowledge what is present in the now. We are not looking forward or backward, but practicing presence. It's an acknowledgement and acceptance of what is. Ultimately, something will change, but we won't see our truest options if we are not in conscious acceptance of what is here and now. Surrender is often practiced before approaching the studio, but it's also necessary during the creative process. We must surrender to what is. For a welder, it may be an errant seam. For a watercolorist, a brown spot. We surrender when we accept what we believe is a flaw and continue in the co-creative dance. By proceeding through, we can discover fresh possibilities. An errant seam may provide a needed resting spot for the eye. A brown smear may ground the composition in a watercolor painting. Meisner teacher and director Terry Martin reminds his students that allow is a synonym for surrender. He elaborates that by allowing, we can move ahead with the action. When the actor allows for a misread line and reacts to it authentically, the scene can be elevated in an entirely new direction. Martin prefers live theater to film for just this reason. Live theater provides for the spontaneity of life and uncovers the authenticity of the present moment. When you give up control to a greater power and allow for what is, you are acknowledging a spiritual truth. Creative intelligence is present in all things. Spirit is present in the fumbled delivery of a line and a poorly welded joint in a sculpture. I'll read that again. A spirit is present in the fumbled delivery of a line and a poorly welded joint in a sculpture. The spiritual artist recognizes creative intelligence in all things and all stages of the creative process. In the end, I walked away from my studio and left my painting untouched. I just stopped painting. Sometimes I don't paint for an entire week, but when I relinquish control, sooner or later, I will walk past my easel in an entirely present state and receive guidance as to my next step. Whether that step requires a flip of the canvas, an expansion of something that is working, or an entire obliteration of the existing composition, I will move forward only through authentic surrender. As any creative artist knows, we must hone our skills and expand our toolbox, but invariably we must practice surrender. We surrender to the creative intelligence within ourselves and connect to an omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient power without. This is such a great chapter. It's something good for me to read because as I've done this readings, I'm aware of how I speak. And when I stumble on a delivery, I've been going back and trying to edit out some of those readings. But that's part of the process, isn't it? When I stumble on a line, it's telling me something. Oftentimes, it's telling me that I'm rushing. I'm rushing through the line and I'm not thinking about what I'm saying. So let's talk about this a bit. Let's talk about what we mean by surrender. I want to reiterate that you can't fake it. I used to try to pretend, oh, I'm going to let it go. No, you have to really feel it. You have to emotionally feel the surrender. So I want to go back to my experience this morning as I was so jazzed with the input from Heidi. And what I shared with her is we can always create intention, and we should always create intention. So when I walk into the studio, yes, I create the intention that I want to create something dramatic, beautiful, intelligent, passionate, but then I have to let it go. And then if I'm not in the right place, or if I'm tense, or it's just not the right day, or if I'm looking at a painting and I don't quite know the next move, I have to surrender to that feeling and react to it and walk away. But I can still hold the intent, and you should still hold the intent. So when you have a challenging issue in your life, you can notice what you want and you hold the intent for something better. And you say, I desire this. And then you just surrender to it. You let it up to spirit. You let it up to that creative law that will come through you and deliver something, some answer to your intention. And you don't know what it's going to be. You can't tell spirit what your creative, this painting is going to be exactly this, this, and this. And when you do that, you're really boxing yourself in and you're boxing the creative power in. You just need to let it flow. So if you sit there and say, I must use this color palette, it's going to limit you to a point. Now, there's a challenge in that, and I do give that as an assignment at times. But in most cases, you set your intention and you surrender to what is. So surrender to something that's going on in your life right now. What can you say? Hey, I accept this situation as it is. I hold my intent for what I desire, and I'm giving it up to spirit to deliver me what I desire. And a great practice that I shared with Heidi earlier is write down your intent. Write it down tape it on your mirror, write it down in the positive voice. I am creative. My intent this last year or two was I am a affluent artist. I am an affluent and abundant artist. I'm financially successful artist. And I stick it on my mirror, and every morning I read through it. And then I let Spirit deliver to me what it's going to be. And I find that it is delivering me abundance in some of the strangest, oddest ways. I can't predict how. Now, if I try to say, oh, it's going to be by being in this specific gallery, that doesn't work. You have to let Spirit and the law of attraction bring you the perfect solution to your intention. So try that. I want you to pick something in your life that you want to work on. I want you to write out an intention in positive format as though you have it right now. I am a, not I will be, or I want to be, or I desire to be. I am abundance. Put it on your mirror and let Spirit deliver you the best thing possible, because you are surrendering to the creative process. I look forward to this. Please leave your comments in the notes, and I will see you tomorrow on the Spiritual Artist Podcast.
Thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're watching this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or iHeartRadio, make sure you choose the subscribe button so that you will receive updates when new segments are released. Most importantly, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.